Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Nuclear Revenge. In today's episode, Pervy Ex-stepfather gets his just desserts, a nuclear revenge tale that took 15 years to pay off. Terrible boss gets his comeuppance. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Pervy Ex-stepfather gets his just desserts, a nuclear revenge tale that took 15 years to pay off. Hey people! This nuclear revenge tale took 15 years to finally resolve, and I couldn't be happier. First, some background is needed to get the setup. My ex-stepfather, I refuse to acknowledge that he married my mother, and since my mother is deceased, I shouldn't have to anymore, is an awful man. My mother married him because she thought I needed a man in my life to help raise me. He was abusive verbally, and was just a toxic person to be around. Even when my mother and he divorced, he still insisted on trying to see me, and I had to be forced to go see him and his new wife every other weekend. When I moved away from the city he was in, due to me ending up in foster care, I didn't bother looking him up, nor trying to find out if he was even still alive. So, when I moved back in 2008, I was kinda surprised to find out he was still alive. Sorry for this lead up, but this is where the foundation of this revenge takes place. When I moved back to the city, I had worked my arse off and bought me my first car, a 1992 Buick Regal Custom. I loved that car, and I also loved helping people out, which was easier with a car. Well, my ex-stepdad knew about the car, because he had seen me driving around town, running errands for the local homeless shelter where I volunteered, taking guys to the doctor's office when they didn't want to wait on a bus, stuff like that, and he was a resident at said shelter. Through my volunteer work at the shelter, I had befriended a couple of young guys who had landed on hard times, and were just working odd jobs to save up some money to move back to their hometown, the same town I had moved back to the city from. After hearing about this, and their plans to just get a Greyhound down there, I told them no, but I would actually drive them there for like $40 in gas, saving them about $250. We made arrangements, and set a date for their departure. Apparently, my ex-stepdad heard about this, so he cornered them in the shower that night, told them that he was gonna have his way with them, and that I would be expecting the same kind of payment when I got them to that town. When they refused, he threatened to kill them, so they finally accepted. When I pulled up to pick them up the next morning, I can tell the air was off, like something had happened. Yesterday, these two guys were eager to leave this city behind, and now, they treated my car as if it had live vipers in the passenger seat. So, I asked them what was up. They told me they didn't know about leaving the city with me, and I assured them it would be fine, not knowing what my ex-stepdad had done the night prior. After a little coaxing, and me mentioning that the Greyhound doesn't even run to where they were trying to go, they loaded up my trunk, and off we went. I could feel the tension in the car, and it had become so thick that you could slice through it using a hydrojet. After we crossed into the neighboring state, they asked me if I could just drop them off at a hotel, and they would try to find other accommodations down to where they were going. I said I wouldn't mind, but wanted to know what brought on the sudden change of plans. After a tearful choking up in the back seat, they told me what had transpired the night before with my ex-stepdad, and I saw red. Ooh, I absolutely despise this man. I wanted to, no, I needed to hurt him, but how? After assuring the two boys that they were going to be fine, and that I wasn't even about to put them through what he did, they finally allowed me to take them all the way to their town. I instructed them to file assault charges against him, and to make sure they submit DNA samples to the police, and they assured me they would. On the way back, I plotted my revenge against him, and that's when it dawned on me, my ex-stepdad was a registered offender for some stupid night when he was 16. He had told me before that he was caught urinating on an elementary school swing set as a youth, and had to register. That was the main reason I ended up in foster care to begin with, something about child endangerment, bureaucratic BS. I also know that he didn't register in our state for the last couple of years, because, had he did, he would have been kicked out of the shelter he was staying in, since they do a 3 times a day, 7-day a week, community outreach meal for not only the residents, but those who needed a hot meal that day, which would also include children. So, on the way back, I had informed the Office of Admissions staff that they had an offender in their shelter, and if they didn't get him out, I would report the shelter to the police. They had one of those safe spot stickers designating the shelter as a safe space for kids. Did I forget to mention that this shelter also ran a youth summer camp and had a youth correctional facility and the library right next to it? They took action almost immediately, but when they went to evict him, he was nowhere to be seen. He had taken off, not to be seen again. Or so I thought. You see, when he vanished from the shelter that day, he thought the safest place to hide out was in his hometown, 9 states away. A smarter person would have looked up what his registration entailed, and would have known that fleeing across state lines without informing law enforcement is a felony, and it doesn't just stop at the state one left, but carries over to every state between point of origin and destination. So, he had racked up 9+ felony charges against him, just for that little jaunt. Fast forward to about 3 months ago, I get a message from the 2 boys on Facebook, asking me for my new number. I give it to them, and am almost immediately put in touch with a county sheriff, who had a federal agent in his office, asking if I knew where my ex-stepdad was. As I was telling both gentlemen that I didn't have a clue, my Facebook pinged. It was my ex-stepdad's wife, telling me to give her husband a chance to reconcile. Gag. A quick look on her page revealed that they were together, living in my hometown, and what's more, seriously, future Darwin Award winners here, they were living next door to the school he was caught urinating on all those years ago. I relayed that information to both gentlemen, and asked them what charges they had on him. They said they had 2 counts of statutory on him, and 3 counts of felony evasion. I mentioned his failure to register, and the day he left my hometown, he had ran to his hometown, 9 states away. The county sheriff informed me that he was calling from that county, and he wasn't aware of the failure to register charges, but thanked me for informing him. Ladies and gentlemen, the dirtbag that nearly ruined my life, my trust with other people, and my reputation in my hometown was finally getting what is owed to him, 25 to life for everything, and isn't eligible for parole for another 17 years, if he lives that long. He is better off rotting in the depths of Tartarus, for the lives he ruined. Terrible boss gets his comeuppance. Setting: high-volume independent tire shop in northern New England, circa 2012. We'll call it 123 Tire. Target: evil general manager. We'll call him J. Aggrieved parties: basically everybody that worked there at the time, but mainly myself and the receptionist. We'll call her Ruth. Backstory. So Jay had been the GM of 123 Tire since he got the previous GM fired in 2004. He was as a complete narcissist who believed he could do no wrong, and if you didn't agree with him, God help you. Over the years, Jay had done a number of illegal things. For example, he was always very physical with his employees. One time, he was wrestling with another salesman. This was commonplace and unavoidable if you valued your job, and the salesman, we'll call him Paul, took a bad fall and broke his knee. In order to avoid the ire of the owner, we'll call him Lou, Jay immediately clocked Paul out and told him to go to the hospital. He also told Paul to use his own insurance, and that the company would pay the deductible in order to avoid a messy workers' comp claim. Paul did as he was told and kept his job, but his knee was never the same and he ended up addicted to opioids thanks to Jay's actions. Jay also had an affinity for the ladies. Now I must mention here that Jay is an ultra-conservative Christian father of 11 children, who believes that a woman's place is uneducated, barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. That being said, several female receptionists came and went over the years with only Ruth sticking around because she needed the money and begrudgingly accepted the regular sexual harassment. When he wasn't behaving inappropriately with every lady that walked in the door, he was behaving inappropriately with every other employee. Want to leave early on a slow day? Wrestle the biggest guy in the shop for it. Jay was big on wrestling, I suspected Jay may also have been wrestling with his daughters, but couldn't prove it. The guy was a real creep. Big guy isn't in that day? Buy him a pizza. Trying to have lunch? Expect Jay to throw food at you. Want to schedule a vacation? Tough. He'll let you know the week before if you can take it. He was a complete child, and I put up with him for 6 long years because I couldn't let him win. The setting. It was the summer of 2012, and Ruth and I had had enough. Jay was completely out of control as usual, now telling me, a Latino, that if Obama won re-election, that he would make my work life hell come November. Ruth was going through a divorce, and he was trying to move in on her. For the record, Ruth hated Jay's guts. It was time to hit him where it hurt. Ruth was ready to drop a lawsuit for sexual harassment on Jay and 123 Tire, and I was ready to drop one for constructive discharge. Now suing an employer doesn't exactly look good on one's CV, but we were both at wit's end. The revenge. Ruth and I decided, one evening, that Jay's ultra-conservative values must be shared by his wife and family. As he was always working, his wife must be the one who goes to the mailbox every day. I created a throwaway email, and got him a Bill Me Later subscription to Hustler magazine. And Playboy. And Penthouse. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and he comes in looking like death warmed over. Turns out, Mrs. J didn't appreciate his new taste in reading material, and he's now living in a motel in the next town over. Now he's not saying that his wife kicked him out, he's far too much of a narcissist for that, but I could put 2 and 2 together. He's decided that he's done with his wife and 11 children, and that he is going to start a new life with Ruth. After all, her divorce is going to be finalized at the end of the week. It was at this point that Lou's sister, co-owner of 123 Tire and not a big fan of Jay, we'll call her Liz, overheard him talking to Ruth in a less than business-appropriate manner. Liz later took Ruth aside and got the straight poop on what had been happening for the last several years, and that was that. The next morning, Lou called Jay to his office and was far kinder than I would have been. Jay was to lose his title of GM and go to work in another 123 Tire location an hour away until the end of the year. Beginning in 2013, Jay would need to find other employment. Jay was also not to contact the location that he had overseen and worked in for years. Also, the location that Jay was relocated to added an hour to his already hour-long commute. I suspect that Lou also encouraged Jay to reconcile with his wife, which Jay did. Epilogue. Jay ended his employment with 123 Tire in January of 2013, and never suspected any involvement from me. In fact, to this day, he stays in occasional contact with me. He went on to work for another tire store, this one a corporate chain, as a store manager. Put his house on the market, bought a new one closer to his new employer, and everything. A year later he was fired after bringing a 7-figure lawsuit on them. They settled out of court, and he moved back to the house he was in before, as it hadn't sold. Jay's next job was 5 minutes from his home, and his new boss was the guy that Jay had gotten fired back in 2004. That one lasted a couple of years, until Jay gave up on finding employment in the area and moved himself and the whole family to the Midwest sometime around 2016. Now in the Midwest, Jay has been unable to keep a job in the car business for more than a year, and as soon as each of his kids turns 18, they seem to move right back to the area they grew up in. His New England home sold in 2019 for less than he bought it for. Ruth still works for 123 Tire, and is very happy there now. The icing on the cake. In early 2021, I finally left my job at 123 Tire, sold my house, and became a full-time RVer. I've seen 47 U.S. states, including the Midwestern state and town that Jay now resides in. I looked him up when I got there, and he came to see me after he got out of work in my new RV. He said, "Boy, you must really think something of me to look me up and want to see me all the way out here." If he only knew the half of it. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.